And first of all, I would like to ask if there are any questions from the floor to begin with. No questions? Okay. Oh, yes.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for the wonderful presentations. I noticed that there's a common thread of land tenure. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the challenges that you see that to the development of your projects.
Well, land tenure is quite complex in everywhere, even in Europe, right? So I think sometimes we underestimate the role that it can play on while developing a project overseas, let's say, from a European perspective. In Brazil, we do have clear rights, but the process of having, let's say, a recognized paper, it could be quite lengthy. It depends a lot of which class you are, social class. So I think there is the advantage of carbon and like what maybe carbon finance brought for developing this kind of project, it's that actually it is structured and we show the relevance of clarifying rights. And so I think just that's the advantage of it, but sometimes for example, for certification, it's hard for an auditor to understand like the process and how complex it could be. So I think from an investor point of view as well, it can be quite challenging to understand. There could be many ways, but I think it's certainly something to be aware of, and we have to try to deal with the best due diligence we can.
Yeah, I would only add, I think there's obviously challenges with privately owned land. I think there's an enhanced challenge also with areas that are commonly managed and how that interaction occurs. I think for us, that's why kind of the stakeholder engagement, figuring out all the different actors that are involved around both kind of agricultural land or forest land and kind of protected areas, how that interaction occurs is incredibly important. And I think we're seeing that in a lot of these projects that are presented here, but it's often one of the things that's cited as lacking in other projects throughout the world, right, is kind of this vision of intervention. I think that is something that we've been trying in our project to manage well, and that's part of the goal within kind of education and capacity building, is also understanding that idea of how to manage land that is publicly or kind of collaboratively shared.
Yeah, maybe for us another unique situation because West Sumatra is a matrilineal society, so all the land is owned by the women. So the first child should be a daughter, of course, because that means the land stays in the family, and it's very well organized under Adat indigenous law system. So we have no problem in land ownership or conflicts. We know where the state forest areas begin, so we make sure we stay out from that area. And the land owned by the women, it's very clear within the families in the village is well defined, and even officially recognized by the government as being ancestral land, and so we have no problem. Similar issue in Timor. We also work on Adat areas, which are in the Indonesian context quite well defined. So that's without, as a social scientist, of course, very interesting work to be in that area. And all the other areas where we're now moving in, we have a site coming in Sulawesi, also on ancestral land. So we make sure we stay on those areas, especially with the carbon regulations from the government coming, which are focused on state forest areas. So we are outside from those regulations. So we are safe on all kinds of, but that's thank you to my team and the network I have in Indonesia to make sure that we are safe on every aspect.
Thank you. Do we have more questions from the floor? Okay. Let me try one. Have you encountered any situations where when degraded land starts to be productive, that then conflicts might emerge. Not necessarily so much land tenure, but could be from within different groups surrounding the area or with the government, whether local or regional. Have you encountered any such situations? So
No, we haven't. No, because as I said, it's very well defined. There's only a bit of jealousy because farmers who are not in the project, they want to join. So we have quite a long waiting list of farmers, so that's why if we can get additional funding, then we can get rid of the waiting list because people now see the benefits and see that it's actually working. In the beginning, we had the first group we tried to work with, they didn't trust us. And it was a funny thing in West Sumatra where always, when we go to a new village, there's always one or two old ladies. They get up and we are discussing and say, yeah, I need to ask you something. This Dutchman, what is he doing here? You know what the Dutch did in the past with our land. They promised us mountains. In the end, they took away the land. How do I know he's not taking our land? So that's one thing, but usually after 1-2 years, then these ladies quite often say, no, I don't trust it with a Dutchman in that group. But then after 1 year, usually they come back and they say, oh, you're not like your grandfather said, no, my parents were never in the war, so don't worry. So that's the only thing we have, but for the rest we have no. Yeah, that we need the funding to make sure that there will not be a conflict, maybe that people are not able to join.
I would only add maybe more than conflict, I think, building on what you said of the jealousy, maybe there's a bit of disbelief at first with certain regenerative agricultural practices, for example, that that the results can really be what they're seeing, that there's not somebody coming in the middle of the night and spraying some fertilizer or something. I think that's something that has happened to us. A lot of the technical agrarian helpers in Chile are very conventional oriented, and so I think that we're really going against a lot of what is being taught, not only some of the things that have been going on for generations, but what is really kind of reinforced from the technical level all the way down. So that's I think also one of the biggest challenges.
Yes, if I can bring some of the feedback we have from this short time of operating, I think there is something like the expectations that we create when you arrive at the project. It's a chicken and the egg problem, because you say, okay, I want to create a project, but then you have to get the funds, but if you don't have the project, you never get the funds. So you have to deal with all those different expectations. And when you're dealing with the tree planting or regeneration, you have like the planting season. So if the funding doesn't come at a good moment, you won't be able to deploy the plantations. We have a new context now of climate extreme events, which is not neglectable for a farmer and even for us. Like we are planting, for example, there is one planting that we are planning for already 2 months, but the rains don't come, or they come too much, and then it's. So I think there's this. It's not a conflict, but it can generate quite a frustration, and to keep like the people motivated, and even ourselves when we are trying to develop a project, is like how to deal with this puzzle that has to be put together at a good timing. And also not to create a difference between each farmers, because you can have, for example, we were thinking of a mechanism of promoting farmers that will be the facilitators locally. So how this could create jealousy amongst the farmers itself, and the competing cost of opportunity that they have of renting the land and leaving to soy production, for example. This is a reality. The cost of opportunity of those, let's say, more destructive production ways are really a difficulty for implementing. So you really have to work with the people that are really motivated, and sometimes they are too motivated, and then you say, well, wait, I still have to find the money, so just keep wait. I think that's something like dealing with the expectations.
Oh, yes.
Dear panelists, I have a question with regards to the use of technology solutions. So here you see a lot of tech companies basically creating like a bioacoustics monitoring solution, deforestation analysis, and so forth. How do you work with them? Like, what are the criteria for you to select a partner? And do you work with NGOs, preferably with academia, or indeed kind of starts benchmarking and doing due diligence on tech solution?
Thank you for the question. I think on the one hand, that's one of the main challenges we're facing is how to monitor the benefits, the ecosystem benefits and the climate benefits that we're generating, especially because our project in particular is not centered on a large piece of land. You know, a lot of the times for the monitoring, you need a minimum of 100 hectares to be able to do kind of on the ground sampling and satellite imagery and stuff. We're a network of small projects. So finding up the perfect partner to be able to evaluate that, get that data and monitor it is something that we're hoping to get to achieve in the conference. But it's definitely a challenge.
I can always talk. No, yeah, we are just starting up our bioacoustic biodiversity monitoring, but how do we select it? Well, that's where these guys from Explorer.land are champions in, so they help me selecting the right people, and they've helped us a lot with all kinds of different contexts, and so far always good what they give to us. It always works very well, so that's for me, thank you to the Explorer.land people. So that's also what they do besides just giving nice pictures. They help you also with advice and giving you the right people to work with.
On our end, we are using satellite imagery. Now we have more recent, like for example, Sentinel images and stuff like that from just a land use overall view, but like to measure biodiversity and fauna, we are still in very early stage, and it's very, I think the technology will fit more we cannot have very expensive trap cameras or things like that in the field because you have the risk of them being stolen. We have already situations like that. So you have to find the trade-off of the cost of the technology and the benefit it will bring. And I think my view, I'm a really fan of technology, but I think sometimes we are focusing more on the technology because it's really nice, right? Like the images, it can be quite astonishing for us to think that we have new tools that will sort everything out. But for this kind of projects, I think for development projects, you have like the social fabric and you have this, I'm just trying to say that tech won't solve it all the problems we have. It can definitely help, but there is also like a low-tech component that it's really relevant. So I think to answer to your question more specifically, it depends of the cost of the solution. For project developers, it can be really tough to pay for very expensive tools, and depending on the scale of the project, could be huge. And if you want to have something statistically representative, it's another thing. So. And I think working with research centers, it's quite key because you have students, they have their scholarships and so on, so you can help like work on the long term.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
Hi. It's a similar question actually, but it's not so much about the tech innovation. I think there's a lot happening there. It's really exciting, but usually you see that being applied to much larger scale projects where maybe the unit cost can be brought down. Your projects are smaller scale. They're really hard to implement. You know, they take a lot of upfront investment, long-term engagement. There's a lot of kind of the social aspect that Marina was talking about, and also managing expectations. And I'm just curious, innovation more from the financial or carbon market side, do you see anything happening there that's really changing? I know we've seen a lot of money flowing into carbon markets the last few years, but for projects like yours in particular, has that been helpful to you? Is it still a huge challenge to find funding? I guess, yeah, opportunities and challenges, if you have any perspectives on that.
You have the credits already. You're selling our credits.
Me again. Yeah, so we're already selling carbon credits for 1 year. And since we got our Plan Vivo certification, it really was booming business. So we even have to sell no to some people who are contacting us, because we had 55,000 credits all sold out in 8 months. So we're adding another 25,000 soon. So we're really moving forward, and now we're getting companies who say, okay, can we then build a forest? And we get the credits later on. So we got now contracts for 8 years, and they want to claim carbon neutrality in 2030. So we're now building the forest in the next 8 years, and then get it certified, and which is just a matter of sending an annual report to Plan Vivo, and then they will get the entire carbon credits in 2030. But they pay up front, and that is now the new challenge, or not even challenge. Yeah, for us a challenge, because the demand is increasing. Yeah.
I would say definitely, for on the one hand, challenges with respect to, like you were saying, the scale of the projects is not what a lot of the investors are looking for. In our particular scenario, again, the fact that it's a patchwork of different projects, difficult, both the obtaining of the data, fitting it to a methodology also, because we're combining agricultural and grazing practices to reforestation, to conservation, and then if you're doing all three of those, a lot of times the costs go up, so that's prohibitive. Again, we've had a difficult time figuring out a solution that can really be kind of not tailor-made, obviously, but that can really adjust to the kind of work that we're doing. Opportunities, maybe companies that are looking for a more of a kind of a wider approach, a more flexible approach that doesn't necessarily fit to a certain methodology. I understand that also entails a challenge of making sure that what you're saying is actually happening. But I think that kind of solution would be most adapted to our work.
On our case, like 2,000 hectares. Thank you, Jacob, for the question. On our case, the 2,000 hectares is quite big for an agroforestry project or any restoration. So it's an aim that we have. So this kind of size already can make shine some eyes in terms of volume of carbon and so on. But what we are developing is we're trying to develop different revenue streams. So it's splitting the project. So there is a carbon component, but it's not all of it. And trying to play with those different streams. Actually, it's the blended finance. So for some parts, we will be able to have funding from different organizations like institutional donors and so on. As most of a lot of carbon projects, they were created like this actually, historically, right? You have a grant in the beginning to develop, and then afterwards you generate the carbon credits, a really common pathway. So we are also trying to do those, let's say, matchmaking with the different work streams of the program. But definitely the fact that there is more interest, the carbon market is really in a good momentum. It helps, of course, because then you can take that angle and talk. It makes more interesting for a lot of different people. But it remains a challenge to have someone paying for the price of the ton. And I would like to thank Explorer.land and Open Forest, Emilia.
Thank you very much. And with this, we close our session. Thank you so much for your insights, for sharing your journeys and your vision. And we wish you all the best in terms of acquiring the funding. And now we have a little musical break and that you will introduce.